Last week, when we let off or stopped, we were talking about out of Daniel what Jesus had said about the abomination of desolation and the things that follow that. So I went ahead through the chapter 9, verse 27, then chapter 11, we started about verse 30 and down through verse 45, the two different places that I believe that Jesus was talking about, probably this in Daniel chapter 11 more specifically. It's got a lot of information that at the present time I can't say that I really understand. There's some things that the Lord revealed to me this week that I've read it. I don't know if I've read it 100 times, probably thousands of times, because of some of these things. I've read them when I'm studying for it, read it over and over and over and over, day after day for a period of days. And sometimes the Lord just hasn't opened that up. There's some of these things that are in Daniel chapter 11 that are like that. But there are some things that I felt like the Lord opened up to me. I'm not ready to share them yet, but that I felt like, the Lord opened my eyes to see something that this makes perfect sense after I see it, but I didn't see it early on, and there probably was a reason, and that was because I was not intended to, or not, it wasn't time to see it. But so I want to go farther than we had gone. So I'm jumping back just to pick up 2 or 3 verses in this chapter, Matthew chapter 24, what Jesus says in answer to the questions. The last 2 questions was, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And those questions he's answering in these words. And so we looked at that, and so I just want to remind us, first of all, of what he said, and then we're going to go farther with that. So in Matthew 24 and verse 15, he says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. He says, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Then that's telling us what the people of Judea are to do. Now, Judea could be considered all of that area of Israel south of Jerusalem, but especially that bottom kind of bubble out of what's called the West Bank. That's where Judea, that's where the Judah, that's where they were given that land, that when the land was divided, that was their land. And so Judea began in the area that's now called the West Bank, the lower lobe, I guess you would say, of the West Bank. But then later, Judah covers that whole almost cone shape going up into Israel. So as it goes up into Israel, there's Jerusalem, and there is the West Bank cut out of the around the edge of it. And so Jerusalem's kind of stuck in there. Judea is that to the south of it. So those that are in Judea must flee to the mountains. It may mean those that are in, it could just mean those that are in the West Bank must flee to the mountains, the Jews in the West Bank or the Christians in the West Bank. But I think it means more than that. And so the area that now has been contested as the ones from Gaza carried out the massacre of October 7th, that was in Judah or Judea, the proper, down in the bottom part of that, or down a ways down into it. And so that was when there was, and that was an abominable situation that took place. I don't believe it was the abomination of desolation or anything like it, but I think it may have been the start of many of the trials of Jacob. The times of Jacob's trouble, the times when the Jews are being tried, when the adversary is pouring out water out of his mouth like a river, trying to wash them away. That, I think, is an event that's going to take place. It's not just an allegory, but it's it's an actual event that's going to take place. We'll talk more about that. We have talked in the past some about that. But those that are in Judea are to flee to the mountains. But what if you're not in Judea? Now, if you're in Judea he says to flee to the mountains, but pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. And then he tells things to do about not going back into the city, not going to get the stuff on your out of your housetop or get your coat or anything else, just to flee. And so the flight that it's talking about here is the flee away from that area, flee to the mountains or flee to the wilderness area, I think is one of the ways it says it in Revelation chapter 12. He talks about it as the wilderness area where God has a place prepared for her, where he will care for her for 1,260 days. Because at that time, it is the beginning. It will be the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Now, the Great Tribulation is going to take place. When it begins, will be this abominable fact or thing that will happen when, and we may get that far tonight that we'll look at that, but when something will be set up, I believe on the Temple Mount, on the wing of the temple, and the temple will likely be rebuilt or started to be rebuilt, or maybe it's just on the temple grounds on Mount Moriah, could even be on Mount Zion. We don't know for certain. A lot of those things are not really clear, but they will become clear as events begin to make them so that it becomes obvious what it's talking about there. But I believe that that abomination of desolation will be this image of the Antichrist that's going to be made by the false prophet, and that will be what will be actually the instigator and the great the one that brings about so much death and destruction in that last 1,260 days, that last 42 months. And so we're going to look into more depth into that tonight. We have in days gone by, but it's time that we look at it again. I want us to make sure that when these things happen, that we recognize it. And we say, we already know that. We know that this was coming, and this is it. So we'll be asking ourselves, is this it? Is this it? Like if you were going along and from one block to the next, you're trying to figure out where you make the turn, and suddenly you're there and you see it, you know it, and you know that this is it, and it will be like that. So those that are Judea are to flee to the mountains, because they will not have much opportunity if they don't make it in those first hours, that first day, first hours. If they don't do that, then they are probably not going to have the opportunity to do much about it. Because for then there will be a great tribulation. So when the abomination of desolation takes place, then there will be a great tribulation. Now the great tribulation is 42 months, 1,260 days. It may be that the abomination will be set up, abomination of desolation, but it may take even days or even months or a period of time to actually get all of this into full swing, so that the things that it's going to talk about occur. But it will be rapid. It'll be rapid enough that you won't have very much time to make decisions at that point or anything of that sort. So that's what we'll have to have it already made up our mind that that's what we're doing. So then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. So you know times of tribulation and trouble that's come upon the world and upon certain groups, upon the Jews in the time of the Holocaust, or on this in October 7th. You saw the types of things that are happening, and other times where tribes have fought against each other and wiped out tribes, and great amounts of people have been wiped out. There's been great tribulation, and certain groups have had great tribulation. But this will be a worldwide event, a worldwide phenomenon that will be brought about by the Antichrist and by the false prophet. So the dragon, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, the evil trinity, will bring this about. It will start with the dragon, who will be cast out of heaven. There's war in heaven. Michael the archangel and his angels will fight, and the dragon and his angels will fight. They will be cast out, and they will be cast to earth. And when they're cast to earth, maybe into the sea or wherever they will be, they will from there begin the great tribulation. They will begin this attempt, and we'll see who is the tribulation against. And I will tell you now, I thought about this earlier today, so I'll just say it right out, that there are denominations that this is one of their cardinal doctrines. What we believe about the Great Tribulation, what we believe about the rapture, these sorts of things, they're cardinal doctrines. It has to, if you're going to be a part of our organization, you have to believe like we do. In the Church of the Nazarene, I'll just tell you, and my own belief, is that we can't be that dogmatic because we don't know for certain, but we've got to be open to whatever God reveals at the time. There's a lot that has not yet been revealed, and a lot of things that will be revealed. When this happens, a lot of things are going to be revealed right then. If you're dogmatic about it enough to say, this is the way it has to be, and I have heard people say that my belief about the tribulation, it has to be that way, or I'm not going to believe God about anything from that point on. Be careful about that, because God has given us enough information to begin to prime our minds to these things, but there's more information to come. I don't have it all, and neither does anyone else. So we're all students. We're not all trying to say this is the way it has to be, it's my way or the highway, but we're saying, okay, let's be open to whatever God is doing, because the days are coming. Now he says, when the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, is standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. And then he says, there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. In other words, there'll never again be tribulation such as there will be in those 1260 days. And so a lot of humanity is going to die during that period of time. And if it were not for the fact that the Lord has limited it to that amount of time, if he allowed it to go any longer, there probably would be, well, he just says, there would be no flesh left alive. But for the elect's sake, he said, those days will be cut short. So he'll cut short the days by saying enough and call it, trumpet will sound, and the angel will shout, and all of the things that go on during that period of time, and that will be and Christ, the sign of Christ will appear in the sky, all of that. So, but prior to that, just prior to that, there will be a time of great trouble. The word great tribulation, megas, thalipsis, means a time of maximum pressure or maximum crowding. It would be like if you took an elevator that was meant to have a maximum of 20 passengers, let's say. That's all you can fit into there. But somebody just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing till you get 40 in there. That's great tribulation. That's great pressure inside of that. And especially then if something happens because of the weight or whatever, and the doors can't open, you can just imagine. So it will be like a pressure cooker in the world. And so it's going to be a time of great trouble, great pressure, a great weight. During the times of the Salem witch trials, they tried witches or suspected witches by taking a wooden door off of a building, and they would lay it on them, maybe a church door, and then they would begin to pile stones on it. They'd take stones and begin to pile on that as they would question them. And if they didn't answer the way that, if they didn't confess or didn't say what they needed to say, wanted them to say, they would add another stone and add another stone and add another stone until, of course, sooner or later it would squeeze the life out of them. That's the same idea as the great tribulation, the great pressure that will be building up in the world that's going to happen, and it will be greater than anything that's ever happened worldwide. This is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not, it's something the Lord really has been working with me about this week to make sure I understand. It's not just in the United States, not just in Europe, not just in the Middle East, not just in Israel or other places like that, but worldwide, all the way from the Orient to who knows where, all the way across the United States and all the way back around again from the Atlantic to the Pacific and on around back to the Atlantic again, all the way from the North Pole to the South Pole, everywhere on the world, there will be this great trouble that is coming upon the world. And it will be such that unless God stops it, it would end all life, which I think Satan would not mind that at all. But so he says in verse 22, the next verse, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So about a fourth of humanity at least will die during this period of time. It says that in one place, talks about a fourth, but there are other places that talk about a third, and there's just all kinds of things that are going to be taking place that will take a lot of human life. I don't know how many people will be left alive. The fortunate ones are the ones that the Lord allows to be taken earlier. So in other words, so you say, well, I'm going to do everything to survive. That is foolish to try to do everything to survive, and yet it's also foolish or against faith to allow yourself to have your life cut shorter than God intends. So you need to live as long as you can live, but survival in this body is not the goal once the abomination of desolation occurs. What is the goal is to stand true to Christ, living or to die. It doesn't matter, to stay true to Christ and to live a life that's pleasing to Him, a life of faith, everything still trusting in God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your spirit, to trust in Him, to believe in Him, to love Him with all of your being, to love Him completely and to continue to trust in Him, because God will never fail us or forsake us. But even in those days when it may seem almost like that He has, understand that He hasn't. It's a lack of understanding, and the day will come when the rewards will be given out. But stay true to God no matter what. And if you're captured, if you are, even if you're put to death, understand that if that is your lot, and we'll read more about that when we get into the 13th chapter of Revelation in just a few minutes. But if that's to be your lot, then so be it. The object is not to survive for 1,260 days so that you can still stand on the earth at the time Christ comes. And yet there will be believers who will be standing on the earth when Christ comes, because Paul said there would be. So many will die to go to be with Christ, to go to be with Him where He is, to be at the right hand of where He is at the right hand of God the Father, waiting for this time to the end of these days, waiting for that. Many will be coming out of the Great Tribulation and going to be with Him. But some, those that are alive and remain, will not go before those that have died. For those that are dead in Christ will rise first. Then those that are alive and remain will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, and they'll be caught up together, all of them together at that moment, to be with the Lord. All of them changed into their glorified bodies, and in their robes of white they'll go to be with Christ and be like the clouds that will be surrounding Him when He returns to the earth, as He comes to the earth before He lands. So for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. There will be some that will be left alive. Now, I want to read more about this in more detail, and there would be an interesting study, and that would be to put Revelation chapter 12 side by side with Daniel chapter 7 to see, because Daniel says these same things in a way, but he says it in a little different way. But the types and figures here are understood by reading Daniel. Daniel gives some of the information. Revelation explains Daniel. Daniel explains Revelation. They work together. to help us to understand all of that. So we'll look at that. Maybe we'll do that at another time. Tonight I want us to look, though, at Revelation, beginning with chapter 12, verse 17, and following, following that is chapter 13, verse 1, and to see how this comes together. So in Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, he says, "So the dragon was enraged with the woman." Now, why is he enraged with the woman? He has decided, when the dragon is cast out of heaven, the first thing that he decides as he is cast out of heaven, being cast to the earth, he decides to flood the woman, to wash her away. And so he pours out of his mouth a lake or river of water that will should flood out across Israel and wash it off into the sea. And that's his intention. But the earth opens up its mouth. There will be an event that will take place, and the earth will open up its mouth and swallow up the flood that the dragon has sent after the woman. Now the woman has been, at this point, the woman has been warned by the abomination of desolation to flee. And she has fled across the Jordan Valley Rift, probably to the other side, and on that area where it says that the Antichrist and that the northern army will not get into that area. And so she has a lot of them. Now I know there'll be a lot of people that won't do it. They don't know the scripture, or they don't know, maybe they won't for whatever reason, but many of them will. And so the dragon is enraged with the woman, and he's determined to wipe her out. But now he cannot reach her. The water that he poured out of his mouth has been drank up by the earth, and I think that this may be a parallel with Ezekiel 38 and 39, where it talks about Gog and Magog and the Russian army and the Persian army, or Iran and Turkey and others, that will be this massive army coming out of the north that will be going down into Israel. But at just the right time, an event will take place. And I don't know exactly, but I think it is this event of a comet, that probably something like a comet, a large chunk of ice, basically, that will, as it comes into the atmosphere, there will be explosions. You can just imagine as it breaks a sound barrier coming through the atmosphere, and it will blow apart. And so falling on all of those armies that have massed around in the area called Armageddon, or Har, meaning Mountain of Megiddo. There's a large, long valley that goes across there. And in that area, they have brought their armies all into that area and are staging for this final event of coming into Israel, when suddenly this blast from heaven comes. It's a comet, it's something like that, a chunk of ice that blows apart, and as it falls on those troops, it is hail, ice, large chunks of ice, molten ice, which is hot water coming down upon them, and also molten rock. As the rock that is in that, it's a dirty snowball, as the rock comes through the air, it melts, and it's falling on them. So, and it's sulfur rock, and it falls on those troops. And as it begins to fall on them, they will recognize the hand of God. The theist among them will recognize the hand of God. I've talked to you about this a lot of times, how that the Shia Muslims that are with them, and even what Sunni Muslims there are that will be fighting with them, along with the Russians, which will be mainly atheists, but there probably are also Christians and others that will be mixed out in with them. But all of that group, when the ones that recognize that this is the hand of God, this is God's action, when they recognize that, they will turn on each other. And so the theist among them will turn on the atheist among them and determine to wipe them out. And of course they will fight back. And so every man will fight the people around him. They fight the people that they've come to fight with, they begin to fight against. And so they fight against each other until they wipe each other out. And when it's said and done, in that valley that is filled with ice and water and fires and all of the various things, in that valley there will be all of the carcasses of all those armies from the north. And up until that time, maybe one of the largest, if not the largest army that will ever exist up until that time. And they will have died there, and their bones will be picked clean by the animals, because their carcasses will just lie there. So they'll lie there for several months, and then the Israelis who have gathered back there will gather all of those bones, and they will bury them, and they will find bones all over the area of Israel of those who have died in this battle, and they will bring them all there, and they will bury them in this valley of Harmageddo, and one it says Armageddon, and that's where we get the Battle of Armageddon. It's the first battle of Armageddon. So that's what it's talking about. She's enraged with a woman, went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimonies of Jesus. That's the last verse of chapter 12 of Revelation. But then the 13th chapter begins. It just carries on. So if you read that, it says the dragon is the subject of the sentence in chapter 12 verse 17, and 13 and verse 1 is just a continuation of that, because it starts with a conjunction. If you've got a conjunction, you almost have to look to say what preceded it to find out what the following means. Because if you start with the word "and," then there has to be something before for it to be that it's added to. So the dragon is the subject. The dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children. And 13 verse 1 just says, and stood on the sand of the seashore. Now, the King James Version said, I stood on the sand of the seashore. The New American Standard, I think it was the 95th edition, or the year 95, or 97 one, it said the dragon, and it was all in white. And then when you get into the latest one that I have a copy of, it has the dragon in a different color to show that it's not actually there. So it's assumed that it's talking about the dragon. Now I suspect that that the subject of this sentence, the continuation then, and stood on the sand of the seashore, you'd have to say, and who stood on the sand of the seashore? Well, it's following, the and joins it back to saying the dragon was enraged, and so and stood on the sand of the seashore. And so at least that's kind of the way that I would think of that. However, if we were looking at Daniel chapter 7, we'd see it doesn't say where Daniel was. Daniel just said, I saw 4 beasts coming up out of the sea, in about verse 2 of Daniel chapter 7. I saw four beasts coming up out of the sea. It doesn't tell us what the fourth one looks like. However, this week as I've been studying this, I can't help but think that one may be the dragon. So I went, I'll just tell you my thinking. I wasn't planning to do this, but I'll just tell you how I was thinking about it. So I'm thinking, okay, the lion, if you go back and you look at the symbols of the different nations, the lion is generally thought of as England. If you look at England, what are their national symbols? One of those. Now, they do also have a dragon, so because you remember how that the knights were of the Round Table and all were supposedly killing dragons. So that's what knights used to do, was kill dragons. And so, but their main symbol is a lion that looks like it has the feet of a bear, and it is very much almost like somebody had taken what it says in Revelation or in Daniel and copied it. But this passage, and so So that's the lion. If you look at what's the national symbol of the United States, the bald eagle. And it will tell you that. I did this. I just went in and looked it up, typed out national symbols of the United States. Okay, type in national symbol of the nation of China. And what you'll find is that the dragon is the national symbol. And if you look at the dragons, some of them look a little different, but almost all of them, they're a snake. In other words, the dragon is like a snake with 4 legs. So it's somewhat like a big lizard, a slender lizard, slender like a snake, but it stands up on its feet or on legs. And so that's the difference. It's a dragon. So the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. That may become very significant in days soon to come. We'll see if it does or not. But the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore, or maybe I stood on the sand of the seashore, or maybe it's just that on the sand of the seashore, beasts were coming up out of the sea. And the sea is the sea of humanity, is what is generally accepted to be, and the seashore is where the humanity meets the present. In other words, the sea meets the shoreline is the seashore. And so standing there, coming up out of the sea and onto land, he saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Now this beast is very similar to what is described in Daniel chapter 7 as the 4th beast. He doesn't say that it's a dragon. He talks about the lion with the eagle's wings, the bear with the ribs in his teeth, and the leopard with 4 wings. But he doesn't say what the other one, he just describes it. But this is the description. It has 7 horns and 10 heads. And we will see that it originally looked like apparently it had 10 heads, but that 3 of those were taken out by one of the 7 that remain, so that one of the 7 has now the authority that would be that they still have the 10 powers, but the authority is given to 7 individuals. And one of those individuals, who may seem small at the beginning of the creation of this, will become very large when he takes 3 of those out. And so now he not only has his part, but he has the parts of those other 3 as well. He has that authority is now in him. And so 10 horns, 7 heads. On his horns were 10 diadems. And so the 10 diadems mean the 10 crowns, meaning that over 10 areas. And on his heads were blasphemous names. Now, blasphemy is going to be, and that means names of God. He will have names that will be names that should not be used for anything other than God. It's using God's name in vain. And so he's a blasphemer. The beast which I saw was like a leopard. So you remember the 3rd creature that Daniel saw was a leopard with the 4 wings. He's like a leopard. That's his body. His feet were like those of the bear. That was the 2nd beast that Daniel saw coming up on the seashore. The bear with 3 ribs in his teeth. But his mouth is like the mouth of the lion. You remember the lion had the wings of the eagle, and he said he watched until the wings were plucked, and he was made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And so if you look at the symbol of the lion in the crest, I think it's called, or the coat of armor, or whatever, or the crest of England, you'll see the lion with the feet of the bear and standing on 2 feet and speaking. So you'll see that symbolism in their national crest, I guess you would call it. So anyway, but he sees all of those together in this entity that has come together. The dragon gave him. Now here's the thing I want us to understand. Even though this is a political entity that is worldwide, that has the world in its 10 portions, I guess you would say, with one that started off small and then takes over 3, so that he has now a very large portion. it's that one that something about him is completely different. And that is that he's more powerful than all the others. And they all recognized that he could take them out. And so the dragon gave him his throne and his power and great authority. So the dragon gives power to this person who will become the Antichrist when he is slain and brought back to life. And so the dragon gave him the power. Whose power is it? It's the dragon's power. The dragon gives him his power in the same way that God the Father gave Jesus Christ his power, his authority, his throne, in a sense, on earth. He was able to do things that were things that only God could do. Forgive sin, raise them from the dead, heal, change nature so that the storm would be stilled in a moment, or just all sorts of things that Christ could do. In the same sense, the dragon will give the Antichrist his power, his throne, and his great authority. Why? Because he will shovel it all back. All of the honor and all that the glory and all the worship will be shoveled back to the dragon through the Antichrist. And so that's why he will do that. So he gives him that so that he gains through that, all of that. He gains all of that. Now, this head, the one, and I believe it's the one that starts out as the small in Daniel, it starts out as a small horn that raises up, but he becomes the head of this entity, which is a political entity that rules and controls the entire world, that is made up of 10 kings, basically 10 crowns, 10 heads, but and then the one that takes over from those three, he takes those crowns. He now wears their crowns as well as his, so that he wears 4 crowns. The others wear 1. And so and this one, he says, I saw one of the heads as if it had been slain. And I've gone back and studied this, and I think that this as if, it seems almost to cause it to be in doubt. It's like it had been slain, but the wording would be really much stronger than that. I saw one of his heads as it was slain, is the way it actually says, as it had been slain. And so that if it had been, would be taken out, I saw one of his heads as it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. That's really would be the idea of it. In other words, he really was slain, he really was killed, and his fatal wound was healed. So he was dead, and now he's alive. Now this is a playoff of what Christ was killed. He laid in the tomb for 3 days, but on the 3rd day he rose again from the dead. This will be a play on that same idea. The head will be dead, and then and it may actually lay in the grave for maybe lay in state for 3 days or whatever. So it's a counterfeit of what happened with Christ, and then the fatal wound was healed. And so when this happens, the whole earth will be amazed and follow after the beast. They'll say, this is very obviously a very supernatural thing. You can imagine it would be like if there was a king or a president of the United States and he lay in state in the rotunda, and while he's laying in state, 3 days after he's been killed, suddenly he raises up from the dead, or someone, and at this point it may actually be the priest or whatever that may become the false prophet that will come and speak words over him and raise him from the dead. But when he's raised from the dead, the whole earth is amazed. They're all watching this. They're all amazed, and they follow after him. They worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who's able to wage war with him? So worship is what it's all about. What is it that the dragon wants that God has, but only God deserves? And that is worship. the dragon has wanted to be worshipped. He wants people to worship him. It's not just to serve him or any of these other things. He really wants people to serve him, to worship him. And so these will now worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they'll worship the beast, saying, who's like the beast? And who is able to wage war with him? And there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. So now he has authority for 42 months. So we're at the point, and it's very close here, at the point where the abomination of desolation is set up. We're going to read more about that, and I think it'll give us more understanding. But very quickly, after his authority is given to him to act for 42 months, that's when that authority will be expressed by the abomination of desolation that will force everyone to worship him, or they will not be able to eat, they won't be able to buy, sell, or own land, or do anything else that people would do, because the authority given to him will stop it. Authority to act for 42 months, and it is a great authority. He opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Now this is what you know about the Antichrist. And right up to the time that he's cast alive into the lake of fire, he opens his mouth to speak blasphemies. And he will continue to do that even after all the things that have been written about Christ, that's written about in the prophecies and all of that. In spite of all of that, he will continue to blaspheme God until the day that moment that God sends him into the lake of fire. And there, you could say, in some places it says he's slain there, but in others that he lives there forever. What does that mean? His body will be slain, and he will be separated from his earthly body, and all that will remain, his soul, his body that cannot be destroyed, will be in that lake of fire that burns with fire and brimstone, and there he will be with the false prophet that we're going to read about next, and he will be there for 1,000 years before the dragon is cast into there as well. And so we won't get into all of that tonight, but it was given to him during those 42 months. What is that authority for? It is to make war with the saints. So it says it was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe, people, tongue, and nation was given to him. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb, who has been slain. Now back up in chapter 12 at the very end, as we were talking about it, let's see, he said, I want us to pick this up. So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children. Notice this, who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. So who is this tribulation against? It's the rest of the children of the woman. So the Jewish children of the woman, those that believe, will flee and they will escape, yes, but they will turn to Christ. And it describes that in Zechariah chapter 12, 13 and 14, but especially chapter 12, 13 talks about that, how that they will come to Christ in that time. But he goes to make war when he can't go against her and against her natural children. He goes against her, you could say, adopted children, who keep, and this is the characteristics of them, they keep the commandments of God. And some would say, well, that means they keep the Torah. I don't believe that. I think it's just exactly what Jesus said. When asked, what is the greatest law? What did he say? To love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, body, strength. And second is what? To love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and the prophets. So keep the commandments. To love God supremely, to love your neighbor as yourself. But the second part of that is, and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Who is it that holds to the testimony of Jesus? Those are the saints. Those are the ones that are saved. So when people tell you, well, there won't be any of those in that time, you have to understand that's who the Great Tribulation is really against. It is is purposefully designed to try to destroy the saints of God who keep his commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. So that's what they're going to be trying to do. Now, so they worship the dragon because he gave power, and so there's given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemous and authority to act for 42 months. And he opened his mouth to blaspheme against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was also given him to make war with the saints. So that's where we go back then to chapter 12, verse 17, to see who are the saints that is talking about that, who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Those are the saints that he's warring with, those who keep the commandments of God, keep and the testimony of Jesus. And not only to make war with them, but to overcome them. And so you might say, that doesn't seem right. Why will God allow that? Because they are going to rule forever, but they have to have this time of the most severe testing that is going to make them, that's proven their worthiness for what God has ahead for them. And so they will overcome. He will overcome them now, but they will overcome 1,260 days later. And so this war with the saints, if whatever happens to us during that period of time, we just need to understand it's a very short period of time, that if we were to live out to the end of it, it's only 3.5 years, less than a presidential term of office. Just 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. That's what it is. So he makes war with the saints to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. In other words, there's not anyone that he doesn't have authority over. Worldwide, he has authority over all of them. And so if you think, well, if I can escape to here, I escape there, I go there, or go there, whatever. The only ones that are told that they will escape, or that do seem to escape, are those who God sends into the wilderness or into the mountain. Let those that are in Judea flee to the mountain. And or in Revelation chapter 12, where he says she flew, I guess she was given the wings of the eagle, and flew into the wilderness where God had a place prepared for her, and where she was nourished for 1,260 days. That, or for times and half a time, a year, 2 years, and half a year. So there will be many who will live all the way through it. But if that's not your lot to live all the way through it, don't be concerned about that. Stay true to God, stay true to Christ, and continue to trust in him. But he will have authority over all, and you're going to have to trust in God in that time. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of the Lamb, life of the Lamb, who has been slain. So everyone will be worshiping him. All will be worshiping him except those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. That's why you want to make sure as early as possible your name is written in the Lamb's book of life, so that you know better than to worship him. If you worship him, the next step of that will be to take his mark on your hand or on your forehead, and to be forever made unworthy for heaven, forever. And there will be no turning back from that. Even though there's some that try to teach that you can, it's easy to see if you read this book, Revelation, that you can't turn back from that. Having made that choice, you've made the fatal choice that can never be changed. So, but those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life, they will not worship him. They will recognize him for who he is. That's why he hates them so much, is because he cannot fool them with his tricks or any of the other things. So he says in verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. And then hear what? Hear this. If anyone is destined, and the word is destined has been added because it just says if anyone for captivity, to captivity goes. So it makes sense as talking about if that is your destiny. In other words, not that God is foreordained that this would happen, but if captivity is your lot, then you will go into captivity. Don't don't feel like God has failed or that you have failed if you go into captivity. If you decide to kill with the sword, it looks like here that says, if anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. In other words, you could fight back, and many probably will. And I'm not saying that that's a sin to fight back, even use that. But just understand this: if you die because that you have resorted to the sword, then you're not dying as a martyr, you're dying as a warrior. That's still good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with dying as a warrior, but it's not as good as if you had stayed true to God and just trusted in Him and not resorted to the sword. So if anyone resorts to the sword, basically, and kills, then with the sword he will be killed, must be killed. So here's the perseverance and faith of the saints. Here's the way that you persevere. Stay true to God. Love Him with your whole heart, mind, soul, body, strength, and your neighbors yourself, and keep the faith. Here is the way you do that. Keep the faith of the saints, because we must trust in God. We can help each other by persevering, but no matter what, persevere. Keep the faith in every circumstance. And that's the whole goal of this tribulation period. It's got to be that you keep the faith and you persevere as long as God gives you. If you're captured, if you're put to death, or whatever you suffer, and you will suffer privation, you will suffer the loss of property, of houses, land, money, everything that people would hold on to and value. Hold on to a very loose grip, because of the fact that it's not yours. It will be taken away, but if you could keep it to the end of your life, you could only keep it for another 1,200 days. It's not going to be that much time, and it will be of no value to you. You can't do anything about it. Okay, well, I know that we're within 2 or 3 minutes, and so I'm going to stop there. I intended that that's probably where we'd start. Then the next time we'll start, then I saw another beast. And so that'll be the third person of the evil trinity. But I wanted us to go all the way from the abomination of desolation, the things that lead up to it, all the way through to the end again in this study. And we need to do this ever so often so that we get more and more of these things in our mind as time goes on. Okay, I'm going to quit sharing at this time and to give you an opportunity to turn on your cameras if you'd like. Questions or comments? Anybody have something that you'd like to say or share? We all good? All right, and hopefully those that didn't get on tonight, I know some that said that they couldn't, but they'll be able to watch it hopefully on YouTube tomorrow. So that's the way that'll work. Well, let's pray together at this time. Father, we're grateful for the many blessings you brought upon us. We're thankful, and we do pray, dear Lord, that you will help us to be prepared to study your word, to know your will, to seek, dear Lord, to be found faithful in all things, and to keep worshiping you and to honor you above all things, not to be fooled by anything, but to keep our minds on you and our hearts, dear Lord, fastened very closely to you. We know that you will keep the saints. You'll keep your people, dear Lord. You will watch over. You said that you would be with us to the end. And so we trust that you will be right up until the day that you come to call your children home. Whether we're alive or not at that time, we know that we'll rise to meet you in the air, changed in that moment. And so we thank you, Father, for that. Be with those, dear Lord, that do have special needs, many of whom we've prayed for already. Others, dear Lord, that we don't know about all the circumstances, but you know about it. Lead us, guide us, keep us. Bring us back together again soon, we pray. And for all that you do, we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.